All right, everybody. Thanks for coming back on a Thursday. It's our last one of the week, but a very important one and a very dear old friend from politics. Not old, we've just known each other for a long time, but Chris McCannell of GrayRobinson and of Washington, D.C. How you doing, man?
Good. How are you, Warren? Great to see you.
You too. So tell us about Washington. What's it been like during the pandemic and how you doing there?
It's been crazy. We've been under lockdown for probably the last 13 weeks. So I think actually a week longer than folks up in New York. And since the lockdown, what's been probably the most important for what I do government relations, so lobbying, so working with clients has been really trying to figure out all these bills that have been happening since mid-March. That first of all, families first, the paid family medical leave, the CARES Act, creating the PPP, the responses to the PPP, the other the reforms that they just made, and the extension through the end of the year, and also the Democratic House passed HEROES Act as well, right, which is the next step that's going to be talked about. Then if you took the coronavirus, the crises, what's happening in public health, what's happening with the economy, what's happening with Congress, match that up also with the George Floyd killing, what's going on with policing, Black Lives Matter. It's a whole, it's like a confluence that none of us have ever seen in our lifetime. Maybe, Warren, your dad saw it somewhat in the 60s when the country was under turmoil and stuff like that. And now you see Congress, moving ahead as well on police reform, other issues. I just saw before I got on this that, a Republican senator from Texas was going to offer legislation to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. So, just a lot of stuff happening, a lot of undercurrents of what's going on in our nation, those challenges with maybe being driven by what's happening with coronavirus, what's happening with policing, but ultimately, really one of the biggest fuels of that fire too is Donald Trump too as president, right? And people's their feeling about him.
Absolutely. Tell us about GrayRobinson.
So GrayRobinson is Florida's second largest law firm. We have the largest lobbying practice in Tallahassee. They acquired myself and my team about a year and a half ago, February of 2019. So there's five of us in our office, bipartisan. I'm a Democrat. Our founding DC partner is a Republican. He's been a mentor of mine for 20 years. So they were looking to invest in the DC space and to buy a practice that already had a group of clients to be able to sort of branch out from. So for us, it's been great because we've been able to leverage their offices and their opportunities in Florida in the DC market. And Florida, as you know, is such a growing state, right? It probably after the next census, it will be, potentially, it could have like the second largest number of congressional seats.
That's a good to be a part of, and congratulations on the acquisition and joining a prestigious big firm. Can you tell us? I know you used to be on the Hill, so yep. You were chief of staff. Now you're on the other side. Like, what was it like to be chief of staff, and where does which side is harder?
I think both are equally as hard. I was on the Hill, and I was there on 9/11 as chief of staff to Joe Crowley from Queens, who we lost about 115 constituents when the World Trade Center went down. And, that was, for me in the Hill, that is really the seminal experience of what happened in those moments, and then rebuilding, and, kind of goes into the war against terror and Afghanistan, all that sort of stuff, right? And it's a challenge. And the day-to-day of working on Capitol Hill, of having to navigate all these issues and having to advocate for a really diverse constituency is incredibly hard, and also being chief of staff even harder, as you're kind of like the number two person. As you know, Warren, you worked on the Hill as well. But I would say being in advocacy, also hard, and probably say harder in a different way. Or I just explained to a friend, at 9/11, there was a lot of people doing things, and you had maybe differences about how, President George W. Bush or Republicans wanted to go in one direction, or us, and as New Yorkers, we wanted to go in one direction and rebuilding but you had, you had a lot of sort of hands in the fire and trying to help out. But it was also, in some ways, as traumatic as it was for the nation, it was really kind of localized as well. New York City, the Pentagon, a little bit in Pennsylvania, right? But also a real psychic scar for the whole nation. What's happening now in COVID-19, and on this side, and why it's been so challenging, is that it's happening to everyone. I can't really think of any industry that's not impacted. I would say maybe the majority negative, but even those who have been impacted positively, let's say, a grocery store chain or, pharmaceutical companies or whatever, there's so many diffuse voices that are trying to get the attention and are trying to talk to policymakers about what they do and how it and how, as the legislation is written, and why they should be a part of it. So I'd say, like, actually on the outside, it's a lot harder. If you asked me a year ago, I'd say, it's a little easier. I think I enjoy the outside more, working with clients and advocating. But the last 90 days, it's like, I've never worked harder in my life, but also my friends on the inside have done the same.
Well, yeah, it takes two to tango, right?
Yeah.
Takes two. So just going back to the Hill for 1 second, what pieces or piece of legislation are you most proud of working on?
That is a great question. There are a couple. And on the Hill, I would say giving the 9/11 Medal of Valor, which is basically, it was something created by President Clinton for law enforcement, who died in the line of service. And we ended up giving that posthumously to the 425 law enforcement officers who died on 9/11, and firefighters and so forth. And that was a real big challenge, because I remember this was like 2001. It was created maybe like 1999 in the last, or 2000, or the last days of the Clinton administration. No one really knew where it was going to be commissioned, how they did it, and there's a lot of sort of tricks and trades. When you think of, like, a medal, just call it, the mint should do this, or this group, the Treasury should do it. It's like, turns out to be the DOD, but it's like this group and that group. So a lot of cutting through red tape. We were able to do that, in time for the third anniversary of 9/11. Off the Hill, last Congress, I was incredibly proud of working with a client who's an APAC board member, to expand hate crimes legislation to the real property of religious institutions. Up to, like, a hate crime would be like, I do something against you, you do something against me. It's based on, religion or, perception and so forth. And then it would be charged as a hate crime against a person. What you saw, 3 years ago, when the desecration of temples, of mosques, of other religious worship sites, Sikh gurdwaras and so forth, it was really that real property. So that was kind of considered vandalism, even though it's hate crime. If they're attacking a synagogue, it is because Jews pray there. If it's a Sikh gurdwara, it's because Sikhs are there. Just because they didn't attack a person. So working with a congressman from Tennessee, a Jewish congressman from Tennessee, and our client, we were able to get that bill passed and signed into law by President Donald Trump. So that was really cool, and a real challenge. And I think really, actually really kind of changes the trajectory too, as well. Kind of gives another tool to U.S. attorneys in their prosecution.
Well, thank you for doing that. I mean, that's extremely important for every religious institution. I mean, when people are approaching, I mean, you never know if there are folks there or not, but their intentions might be one thing, but they could always escalate further.
And that's what the U.S. attorneys, when we met with them, also said. So it's just like, even as a threat too. Like, when they go out and they talk and they say, it's like, even now, like, your vandalism, your attacks on this property, that now is considered federally a hate crime.
That's something to definitely be very proud of and being a part of. And again, thank you. What's it been like on the client side? I mean, I know we're all on Zoom. We're on Zoom right now. What's it been like to, to deal with clients who are used to meeting with you in your office or, just meeting in person?
I think it's been different. It's been, in some ways, I think it's allowed us to do a lot more, but it's also, I think, has made it the day a lot busier. I think people have kind of gotten to the chase a lot quicker because you forget about how much time you have between going to and from a meeting or the coffee, walking to the coffee place, sitting down, having some small talk, and then having the coffee and leaving. Now what's happened is you seem like you can be a lot more productive, but the meetings are also a lot more impactful too. I think though, I mean, lobbying is sort of that, it's a high touch environment, right? It's a relationship based environment. You and I have known each other, for over 12 years. But it's like, it's been, for folks I have a relationship with, it's been fantastic. For folks that maybe you're trying to build a relationship with, it's a little bit harder, because, well, it's also in Zoom, when you're on something like this, it's hard to sort of have those side conversations or talk to someone about like, hey, what do you really want to do? Or how can I help you get to that next level? Or how can I, help your boss do what he really wants to do? So,
Yeah, I think even the little side conversations you have in person. I mean, like if you even banter or chit chat on Zoom, I feel like people are like, "What the hell are we? You're wasting our time."
exactly.
Yeah. So there's definitely none of that going on. How about with Congress? Like how does that work? How are you lobbying? Also through Zoom or through phone?
Through Zoom, through phone calls. But Zoom has been a really big one. Also, what I've seen under this crisis and this environment, I have to give both sides incredibly, give them both props. But particularly, I think for the Democrats, have kind of been thought of as like maybe less focused on business or understanding the impact of regulations and so forth. There's been a real appreciation amongst Congress as to like all the different factors that are happening in the community, like from the small businesses to that local restaurant, all the way up to the Fortune 500 company that's based somewhere, and how all of these matter, and the jobs that they bring, and the stake they have in the economy, which I think that's kind of a silver lining out of this whole thing. Is I saw some numbers the other day. I'm sure you saw this too, Warren. Is that the highest income folks their spending dropped the furthest. So all those folks in New York, in my neighborhood, Logan Circle, DC, who, we're not spending, we're at home, we're just like, we're cooking like breakfast, lunch, and dinner at home. So many people depend on us spending money are now suffering because of that. And I think now that's actually starting to get through, because particularly on the Democratic side. So that's been, I think, one of the highlights of this. I think people are wanting to learn about industries and what do you mean, like, why don't you have like, equity on hand? Why don't you have working capital? Understanding that, for a lot of small businesses, the working capital is, hey, the money I bring in this week pays the paychecks at the end of the week, and the process starts up again the next, come Monday morning. And that's okay. But, under a situation like that, it's really traumatic. So.
It's funny, like as an outsider now, it seems like where government has most of the time is dysfunctional on the local, municipal, sometimes federal level. It seems like everyone came together and really thought about what practically works and how you dive into how they dove into things together. I know that there were still issues, but it was nice to see unity when it was needed because we're dealing with a global crisis.
Yeah, there really was, and it still exists. I mean, I think the police reform too. I think the fact that Senator Tim Scott is leading in the Senate, it's a little bit of a different bill than what the House is trying to do. But the fact is that I mean, you Warren, you follow this, and any of the viewers, the Senate does not move very quickly. And Mitch McConnell's number one priority is getting judges confirmed. The fact that before the July 4th recess, Mitch McConnell wants to do a police reform bill on the Senate floor with Tim Scott, as the lead sponsor of that, says a lot. It says how important this issue is at this time. Now the goal is you're gonna have to get that passed by the House and put on the president's desk. But still, the things are happening, and the protests and the energy that's happening outside of Capitol Hill and outside of Washington is reverberating here.
That's good to hear. It's good to hear. What I want to know, I mean, you guys were involved in the coronavirus task force, is that correct?
Yeah, we were involved with the coronavirus task force, and we also have like a office. We also had like a firm task force as well that we've been working on as well.
Can you talk about it a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I have a number of clients that have been sort of engaging with the White House, particularly on some telemedicine issues that have been, really sort of something that's like I don't think before sort of mid-March people even really knew what it was, or our parents didn't weren't utilizing it to get Medicare, and now it's sort of in everyone's lexicon. So really, working with them to try to understand some of the challenges they have. On one client that we have, for instance, you can't give a telemedicine benefit to somebody unless it's part of an overall employer-based healthcare, just because of like the restrictions, and the government doesn't want people just to like kind of give away, like nonsense insurance, right, or things that like don't really have any value, or or poor plans. So Obamacare put these restrictions in, and other legislation did as well. The problem is now is a lot of companies don't offer insurance, right? Their employees get it on the exchange, they get it through Medicaid, but those people might not be getting a telehealth benefit. So we're trying to convince them that you should allow this exemption for this telehealth benefit, where it is not insurance coverage. It is being able to talk to a doctor. It is being able to text. If you feel sick, figuring out where to go to get a COVID test, or or to seek help, or to get a prescription renewed or something like that. It's not a health insurance product. It is not it's a virtual care product, and we've been working with them to try to convince them of that. That's been a big challenge because it's the Trump administration, but it's also Capitol Hill, and there's legislation, but we'll continue onward.
Are you doing that you're seeking long-term application for telemedicine, correct?
Yeah, we'd love to get either. Well, we would accept something for an exemption for during the crises, but actually for the long term as well, because so many of these, I think a lot of the stuff that's happening right now probably isn't going to go back, right? And things like telehealth is not going to go back, and being able to offer these services to employees that don't have insurance coverage, employer insurance coverage, is a beneficial to them.
And it also just lowers the cost of the healthcare system.
Exactly, it lowers the cost of the healthcare system, and it also provides people. It also makes employees healthier too.
And it also doesn't make you rely on WebMD, which just freaks you out and stresses you out. If you can instantly talk to a doctor, it's like, all right, now I have somewhat of an answer.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think, I've had some conversations with people in technology. I feel like we're moving in a direction where there'll be more Bluetooth devices where you can have a stethoscope that you can feel yourself, and the doctor can get some kind of reading, and other devices. But obviously, it's one step at a time.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I know we talked about some of your highlights. We talked about your most proud bills. How about some highlights from your career, not legislation related? Because you've been all over the place. You've done amazing things. I just think it's awesome to share.
Hey, yeah. I think that's a great question. I would say, first of all, one of the best highlights is it's meeting people like you and your family and your dad, and working on a campaign. And your dad is the king of Brooklyn, is the macher of Brooklyn politics, but also some of the relationships you just meet throughout the time. And I've had tremendous lifelong friendships of people that I've met on Capitol Hill, both working with them in the trenches, but also just lobbying and advocating. For instance, normally right now, I would be getting ready to go to China. I'm on the board of the U.S.-Asia Institute. My boss, Crowley, was the leader of the U.S.-China Interparliamentary Exchange. We've set up a program between Wuhan, which no one ever heard about before March, and which is on the Yangtze River, and Memphis, Tennessee, for the Mississippi. We went, my colleague, who's a friend of mine, we went twice, last year and the year before, and we were getting ready to go again. And we were trying to bring congressional staff from the Mississippi River Basin over to China. And obviously that's not happening. And, maybe something virtually will, but seeing a program like that really, succeed and kick off was, brought me a lot of joy. And also seeing folks who go on something like that, and continue to build their career on Capitol Hill or in the administration has been a lot of fun. The other highlights too has been working with both the Obama administration and with folks there, and some opportunities there, as well as with President Trump and some of his folks. A good friend of mine is now at Treasury, and he's working on the PPP program, and he's been incredibly helpful, just sharing information and being a resource to learn more about it and to help clients navigate that. And the politics aside, it's great to see your friends succeed. And, I can't think of someone better than, this guy to be there at this time to help small businesses. He's smart, he gets it, he's an attorney. So that's really, I think, some of the highlights.
I was going to ask you if you had friends in the administration, so I'm happy you mentioned it. Who's your idol within politics or government?
Wow. That's a great question. Currently or in life?
Let's do one of each. One of each.
Historically, I would say, I guess I would say Eisenhower. First of all, my grandfather fought in World War II. He liberated concentration camps. I think the fact, of Eisenhower's resolve, to, not only to win the war, but also to, come back to the United States. And he was really like one of those like people who, he's a war hero, but he did more, and I think sending the troops to Little Rock to enforce the Supreme Court really, I think, proved his mettle. It was ahead of the times too, right? Because it was before even the '60s and the Democrats and LBJ and all he wanted to do. And I remember what my grandfather said with Eisenhower, that Eisenhower told them that they had to tell, that they had to show the Germans what destruction they brought and the deaths and dying and illness that happened, and that they had to be marched through the camps to see for themselves that it wasn't, and I think the thing was with Eisenhower, I think he was incredibly fair, and he was incredibly, had a very clear heart as to, what was right, what was wrong, so I would say, him as leader, and then, he's the one, I guess he can take for our post-World War II growth and expansion, and everything sort of came out from him. But historically, I'd say Eisenhower was pretty impressive, and what I've read and followed. For current, I'd say there's probably, I would say maybe like two people. I mean, first and foremost, I would say, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who has, just her tenacity, the fact that, under Obama, the legislation that she pushed, the Affordable Care Act, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, all these issues that, and just her, kept pushing and getting the votes done, and was able to, unite a very fractured Democratic caucus, was really, I think was really amazing. And she continues to do so too, right? I think if you look, Warren, you mentioned the PPP and CARES Act and that of keeping people together. When you look at those legislation of understanding the urgency and the need to move quickly, And she did that. She did that before as well, before Obama with Bush on TARP and the Wall Street reform. So I think there's no better vote counter. There's no better politician who understands her caucus. She will go down in history as one of the best speakers that we've ever had. I think her shoes will be really tough to fill. And I just say for second, I would just say, Tim Scott is really, every time I go by his office and you just see that he was elected, and you see what challenges we're having and what's happening even now on TV and everything. The fact that, he was elected in South Carolina, and you may or may not agree with his politics, and he has a different direction and approach, which is not that unusual, for a free market Republican. But just the fact that, as African American, the first African American elected, from the South since Reconstruction, and someone who's, fairly young too, 52, 53, I think is just really inspiring that, there is going to be hope. There are going to be some new faces. A lot of our battles and the issues that we talk about and that have divided us, are hopefully going away as this generation of baby boomers and others move on.
Those are great options. Great answers. I apologize. Before we wrap up, you're so plugged into Capitol Hill, and have been for so many years. Again, you've been talking about everything that you're working on as far as legislation and all the moving parts right now, and this tidal wave of events going on. Let's go city, state, and federal. Like, what do you think are ways that from what you're seeing business owners, leaders can be hopeful?
I think, well, first of all, federally, let's start with federal and go down. I think federally, I think there's going to be another relief bill. That there's been even some more conversations today. The size unclear, but you have bipartisan support in the Senate for helping the state. So when you hear that money is not supposed to be going to the states, that's, I think, BS. I think either Democrat or Republicans who know the crises the states are facing because of COVID and these other and other issues. So that's a good thing. I think on the state level, I think the coronavirus has really put the spotlight on, I think, on competency and sort of that balance. You see it in New York with Governor Cuomo. You see it in Ohio with Governor DeWine, and also down in Louisiana, you saw it with Governor John Bel Edwards, which was one of the earliest hotspots, where they were able to kind of, flatten the curve, get it under control, and sort of begin. And I think that compared to others who are sort of just there as, the cheerleader for whatever party is in control at the White House, or, maybe. And I think I think you're seeing that confidence, and you're appreciating that too. And then finally in the cities, I think the cities is going to be really, I think it's going to be tough. I mean, I'm glad to see your family's in Brooklyn. I have, family up there as well. It's the coronavirus, the challenges of the recent rioting and protests have certainly, knocked all cities back on their heels. I still think people want to live in cities. I think people want to be, they want to be in offices. This is okay to do right now. This is not collaborative. This is not the arts, culture, education, excitement that you get of being in a city. So I think that, people who are sort of writing the obituary of cities are doing it a little bit too soon. I think that you're going to see them coming back. It's going to take a vaccine or a change in how we manage this pandemic, but they will be back.
That is hopeful. And yeah, there was an article in the Journal today. It was an opinion piece about exodus from cities. So I'm glad to hear that.
I read that.
I still love the city, but so before you leave, where can we find Chris McCannell, and where can we find you at GrayRobinson?
You can find me at Chris from FROMME Maine on Twitter. And then it's Chris.McCannell, MC, CANNELL McCannell at Gray-Robinson, ROBINSON.com.
Cool. Chris, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate the insights. You're awesome. I miss you, man. Thank you.
You as well. Thanks again, Warren. Take care.